Well, hello again. This is Melissa from Homestead, and I'm out in the garden, and it is time to pick green beans. Look at that, aren't they gorgeous? And I have already gotten started. I've got a little bit of black-seeded Simpson lettuce there, but I'm focusing on the green beans right now. So I'm just going through and picking some of these bigger ones here. And then we're going to go in the house and we're going to cut them because we like French cut green beans. And I will go through the steps with you. I don't like my beans canned because I prefer most of my veggies tender crisp and they just get too overcooked when you can them. So I will go through the process with you and we will get these ready to freeze. Now, as you can see, this is my second harvest for the year. I got one last week. I ended up with 5 meals worth that I bagged and froze, and we ate a meal that night because it was yummy. I think I got more this time, so this is my second picking, and I have 6 plants. So I think I'm faring pretty decently for the year. Now I threw them in a colander and gave them a good rinse off. Now we're going to get to cutting them because we in this household prefer French cut green beans. And as you can see, I have a pretty simple setup here. I've got one of my favorite cutting boards. I only use this for fruits and vegetables because it is plastic. I have some less porous ones that I use for any kinds of meats. I've got a nice paring knife here. I found this works really well for cutting my green beans. Now, the cutting is pretty simple. There are a few different ways. The way I like it, they look a little fancier. I kind of hold the knife at a very sharp angle, and I take the ends off. See, it's a nice angle cut. It just looks a little fancier. And then I'll usually, for the longer ones, I'll cut it just the same way right in the center. And then if you look, there's a seam right on the bean. I cut right down that to cut them in half lengthwise. And I forgot to get a bowl to put my cut beans in. Hold on a minute. Okay, so as you can see, I grabbed a decent sized metal bowl. Now, the reason why I decided I prefer to use a metal bowl is because I will use this again when I'm blanching the beans. And, I'll get some boiling water. I've already got water in the pot on the stove. I will get that to boiling, drop the beans in. Regular beans, you need to blanch for approximately 3 minutes. When you're doing them French cut like these, you only need to do it for 1.5 to 2 minutes. And then I pull them out of the boiling water and get them directly into an ice bath. And I like to use the metal bowl because it will hold the cold in longer. The water doesn't heat up and the ice doesn't melt as quickly. So I'm just going to go along and start cutting all of my beans. And I'm not going to bore you with watching me cut every single one because this is going to take me. But once I get them all nice and French cut, I'll throw them in the bowl. Now, if you have any, I knew I had a good example, like this one, you can see here, looks like a bug got to it and ate part of it. So we don't want to eat that part. So all I'm going to do is cut that part out. Yep, the rest of it still looks fine, so we're good to go. Okay, I'm going to continue cutting these, and I'll get back with you guys in just a minute. Okay, the colander is empty. Got my cutting board with the ends and any pieces that looked bad, any scraps. And look at that beautiful bowl of French cut green beans. Now we're going to take this over to the stove. We're going to take it over to the stove. We're going to dip it in boiling water for, I usually run about 2 minutes. Then it's going to go straight from the boiling water into an ice bath. Right in the same bowl it's in right now. I try to simplify things because it's less dishes I have to wash. So let's get started on blanching. Okay, so I've got everything set up. I've got my pan that I'm going to blanch in with water in it. I'm going to do this in a couple different batches. And just so you know, I did end up having to bag up the beans, throw them in the fridge overnight because my daughter came home from work and took the kitchen back over. So we're starting it back up today. So I've got my pan, I've got a slotted spoon to fish them out with. I have a strainer, a very fine mesh strainer that would work great, except for the fact that this pan's too small. It works much better if I do my blanching in a larger pot. I guess I could do that today, but I'm not going to. It's just going to be easier to do it in the smaller pot. And in the sink here, I've got my metal bowl with cold water and ice cubes in it. So when we pull the beans out of the pot, they go directly into the ice water to stop the cooking process because I prefer my veggies tender crisp. That's why I don't can most of my veggies because I don't want them overcooked. Okay, we are getting close. Let you see in there without steaming everything up. We're getting close, but we're not quite to a rolling boil yet. We want it to be to a nice rolling boil before we start blanching our beans. Okay, so now we are getting there. So now it's time to start processing these beans. So I'm just going to drop in a couple handfuls here. Set my timer for 2 minutes. Now they did bring the water temperature. Adding the beans to the pan did bring the water temperature down a little bit. So it's not at a rolling boil right now, but it's hot enough. It's still going to process the beans to the point I need them to be processed at. Now I just want to show you, see how pretty and bright green they're getting? That is something you want to watch for when you're blanching because it makes them a nice, but once they're blanched properly, it makes them a beautiful, vibrant green color. Okay, and the timer's going off. We're just going to go ahead and shut that off. I'm going to take the pan right over here. Not sure how this is going to work. Okay, so now I'm just going to take them out of the boiling water and get them directly into an ice water bath. That stops the cooking process, so they will stay nice and crisp. And that way, they won't be overcooked for my liking. You can see they're just going to hang out in the ice bath while I do the rest of the beans in batches and get them all into the ice bath together. I like to do this one step at a time instead of, do this one little bunch, then dry them and flash freeze them. I like to just do it all at once. It's, in my opinion, it's just easier. Now, I put the water back on the burner. I'm going to get it back up to a rolling boil before we put our next batch in. And if you're wondering what that humming in the background is I have my countertop ice maker going. And this thing is super handy for doing stuff like this because I just open it, take out the basket, and dump the ice right in there. Keeps my water nice and cold so I can keep going and I don't have to change out the water in between batches. Okay, my water's back up to a rolling boil, so we're going to drop another batch in. As I said, I could have done more at once with the bigger pot, but I don't mind doing it this way. Looks like we're going to have 3 batches this time. Last time I picked, which was last week, I only had 2 batches, so that's a little exciting. Timer went off again. It's time to move these into the ice bath. I'm not going to show you every time I do it. And we're back up to a rolling boil. We'll get this last batch into the hot tub. Set our timer for 2 minutes and we'll be back. 2-minute timer went off. We're going to get this last batch into the ice. And the rest of them are just chilling out in there. Okay, so traditionally blanching, you do whatever the time is for whatever vegetable you're doing. You do that amount of time in the boiling water, and then it has to sit in the ice water for the same amount of time. So I just set my timer one more time for that 2 minutes, just to make sure the new beans that I put in there are going to cool down enough before we move on to the next step. Okay, my timer went off, so I'm going to grab my spinner. Yes, traditionally this is a salad spinner, but it uses centrifugal force to remove the water. So it'll work to help dry these off a little bit too. This is the first time I've tried this, so fingers crossed that it works. Just going to use my slotted spoon and take my beans from the ice water. Oh, we don't need the ice cube in there. Right into my salad spinner. Try and fish out the remaining ice cubes because they're becoming a bit of a hindrance. But yeah, this is the first time I'm actually trying to use the salad spinner for my French cut green beans, but I thought it might work to decrease the amount of drying time these need before we flash freeze them. So I'm just going to scoop these in here. Now, I know I had stated earlier about the matching times between boiling and the cold water, but just so you're aware, it won't hurt anything if you leave them in the cold water a bit longer. It's a minimum time. So like the first batches that I did sat in here for quite a few minutes and it's not going to hurt a thing. Just trying to get these last few out of here. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and get my lid on here. Unlock it. We'll give it a couple of spins just to get some of the extra water out of the beans. And then we're going to lay them out to dry for a little bit because you want at least most of the moisture off of them before you flash freeze them, because otherwise you're going to have ice on them, and that can lead to freezer burn faster. And that is not what we want. I don't know if you can see it or not, but you can see, we'll move you a little closer. You can see all the water on the inside of the bowl there. And that's less water we have to wait for it to dry off the beans. So now, what I've got here is I've got a dish towel. I threw some paper towels over top of it, just so I have a place to absorb any of the water that drips off of these. And I try and lay them out as flat as humanly possible so we can get as much water as possible off of them before we flash freeze them. I might not have enough space on this towel to do all of them at once. Now we're getting them kind of stacked up a little bit, and that's not what we want because that's going to take longer to dry. So I'm going to leave the rest of these for now. What I'm going to do is take some more paper towel, throw it over top, just kind of press, try and get as much of the water and moisture off of these as possible before we start flash freezing these. Now, the reason you want to flash freeze them is then they are frozen, spread out. So if you only need half of your package, they're not all stuck together in a big old clump. Okay, this out of the way for now. Try and pat these off a little bit more, try and get them. I mean, the likeliness of you getting all of the water off of them, slim to none. You got to be realistic. You just want to get as much as possible off. And then I've got a piece of parchment paper on this pan. I'm just going to kind of sprinkle my beans in here. So I have one layer. I mean, they're going to be stacked up a little. I'm not going to sit here and lay them out perfectly so they're sitting in rows or anything. Who's got time for all that? So I'm just going to get a single layer on the parchment paper. And then we're going to stick this in the freezer. You want to make room in your freezer so this can lay flat and let them freeze for a couple of hours. And then they'll be ready to bag up. I personally like to vacuum seal them. Just one more step to make them last a little bit longer. If you don't have a vacuum sealer, obviously put them in freezer bags or however you want to do it. But I like the vacuum sealer because they last longer in the freezer that way. I'm having a bit of Butterfingers issues right now. I might actually have enough room on this pan. No, I don't think I'm going to get them all in here. So if you can see that, they're kind of laid out. Yeah, they're laying on each other a little bit, but they're not stacked really high or all piled up. They're a little bit more than just a single layer, but it's not terrible. And we're going to take this and pop it right into the freezer, which I already have a spot cleared unless my kids move stuff around. Got a spot cleared where they'll lay nice and flat in there. We'll give them about an hour or so, and then we'll pull them out and bag them up to vacuum seal them. I did want to show you quick. I got the rest of the beans out of my salad spinner and I've got them laying out drying. But look at all that water that we pulled off using the salad spinner. I feel like that might have been a good idea. Okay, got the last tray of beans out of the freezer. Now, I'm not going to lie. I prefer to label my bags before I put the product in the bag and vacuum seal it. It's just easier. It looks more legible. Oh, so where to go? French cut green beans and the date. I like to date them. Oh, and the girls are going to start barking. I like to date them because I like to, as a general rule, follow the first in, first out rule of thumb, where whatever was put in there first should be used first. Just a good rotation to follow. Now, I'm estimating that this should be about 3 meals worth here. So, okay, got our bags labeled, got my machine on. Now, we actually bought this vacuum sealer this year. Our old one was really old and it took a crap on us. So we bought this one on Amazon. I'd love to put a link on here, but I cannot attach links to my videos yet. I'm trying to get to that point, but not quite there yet. And we, depending on how many of us are here for dinner, we don't eat a whole lot of beans for dinner, so that looks like about enough for a meal in our household. So I will just vacuum seal it. It's quick, it's easy. The vacuum sealing versus like your traditional freezer bags you get from the grocery store or whatever, the food lasts longer in here. So if you don't have a vacuum sealer, I highly recommend it. We use it all the time for so much. They're fantastic. And I do have 2 grandkids on the way. I'm going to do a couple of these bags smaller, because sometimes it's just Lucas and I here for dinner, and we don't eat that big of meals anymore. But as I was saying, I have 2 grandkids on the way, so I'm hoping to get enough product from the garden this year that once the babies are at approximately 6 months of age and they're going to be solid food starter ready, I'm hoping to be able to make some homemade baby food out of some of my veggies this year. That way I know where it came from. I know exactly what's in it. It would be all pure, no additives, no preservatives. And I'm really excited for this part of my journey. So this one's kind of a small bag, but that's okay. Maybe this will be a baby food bag. Who knows? Just trying to make sure I get them all. Yep, that's a 1-person portion, but it is what it is. I don't want anything to go to waste. That's why we do this. And then I'll just go ahead and throw these in the freezer and This batch of French cut green beans is done. Let me know in the comments. How do you preserve your beans from the garden? Do you can them? Do you freeze them? Do you dehydrate them? I'd love to know. For now, we're making this one a wrap from Grubauer Homestead.